Disturbing new reporting today about that deadly ICE shooting in Maine is raising enormous questions about the agency's vetting and training processes. As we reported on Monday, an ICE officer shot and killed a 26-year-old Colombian national named Johann Sebastian Guerrero in his car near his home. Guerrero was not actually the target of an ICE warrant, according to the officials briefed by the Department of Homeland Security. And the Associated Press has new reporting today about the officer who shot him, with several of the officer's own close relatives telling the AP that the officer is, quote, an Army veteran who has struggled with serious mental health issues since early childhood and never should have been given a badge and gun to patrol American streets. That reporting, according to the AP, is based on conversations with the man's ex-wife and two daughters who spoke on the record, and another ex-wife and an immediate family member who spoke on condition of anonymity. ICE did not confirm the officer's identity to the AP, and the officer did not respond to text messages or an email seeking comment. The AP writes that the officer, quote, told his ex-wife late last year that he had been hired by ICE. She said that because of his long history of psychiatric issues, she thought he was having a mental health episode, and she didn't believe him. She later spoke with CBS News.
I didn't realize that he was actually working for ICE until yesterday, and I was completely shocked because I'm like, how do you keep getting into these jobs where you're around guns all the time? I told him that I was not going to lie for him, that I've waited years to speak my truth. I've been silenced long enough, and now I need to come out with everything because a man lost his life. So it was abuse, not only to me, but to our daughter. And even being divorced from him, I've dealt with harassing phone calls, threats of him wanting to kill me.
Joining me now to discuss is Brad Lander. He is the former New York City Controller. He is the Democratic nominee for Congress in New York's 10th District. So, Brad, I want to ask you about what you think the reporting thus far tells us about the training that is being given to ICE agents and the vetting processes, for that matter.
I think it tells us two important things. I mean, there's not much training or vetting. They've hired up 12,000 new agents, and it's clear that they're not doing the background checks, that they're not providing the training. The other thing is, though, that a culture of cruelty and violence is part of what they're cultivating. They clearly want officers who are willing to act in cruel ways and to threaten people. The cruelty, in many ways, is the point. They want to scare people, have them afraid, and they're communicating to these officers that there's not really accountability.
Yeah, there's not really accountability. It seems like they're in a real hurry to get any warm body they can into these positions, and either they don't care, or maybe they're even selecting on the fact that, you know, people want these jobs under this administration.
And if you do something, then the federal government's going to lie and say, you know, the victim caused it, even though there's no evidence of that. If you didn't have your body camera on, so what? In immigration court, I've seen folks like throw people to the ground and then just be back the next day.
Okay, so speaking of immigration court, you have been regularly visiting immigration court despite being arrested a couple of times. You recently met two boys, as I understand it, who have been separated from their parents, who are being held in ICE detention with little or maybe no access to legal counsel. Can you tell us a little bit about their story?
Yeah, so the last 2 weeks I've been in a docket that's for detained kids. These are kids who maybe their parents are here, they crossed with a different relative. So if they were detained, they're put in custody with the Office of Refugee Resettlement, or ORR. But that has gone up dramatically. There are many more detained children, more than twice as many than there were during the Biden administration. And the length of time they're being separated from their parents has grown. I was in court 2 weeks ago. There was the case of a 3-year-old girl who our government has separated from her mother for 10 months. Her mom is going through immigration proceedings, but the whole point is that she's supposed to be able to sponsor to get her daughter out, because while they're awaiting finding out whether they'll be able to stay here or not, what government on earth would separate a 3-year-old from her mom? And then this week, there was one 12-year-old boy who didn't have a lawyer, didn't have a child advocate. He just went up. He was brought in. He's in a shelter. He's like, that's where he's being kept while he's separated from his mom, who's also in New York City. He goes up and sits at the witness desk. And the judge is talking to him through an interpreter, telling him, here's your asylum application to fill out. He's 12 years old. He doesn't speak English. And then there was this one 16-year-old who they called his dad in to fill out the sponsor paperwork to try to get him out. But it was a trick. It was ICE and not ORR. He came in for the interview. ICE detained his father, like used his son as an abduction trap. Yeah.
So as a trap, as bait, essentially. What is the government's possible excuse, rationale for doing something like keeping a 3-year-old girl from her mom for months when they are both here? And the mom is not in detention or is in detention?
The mom is not in detention. She's in immigration proceedings, so she may not be allowed to stay. But no, the mom.
So what possible rationale can there be?
In that case, what they said is that the mom's boyfriend has an ex-girlfriend who lodged a domestic violence. But so therefore we keep this 3-year-old girl separated from her mom for 10 months. Really, cruelty is the only explanation.
I also want to ask you about what's going on with these arrests at these courthouses. So one thing that has been striking that you've been observing in an immigration court and that others have been reporting on is that people are filing their paperwork, they're showing up for their court dates, they're getting arrested anyway. As I understand it, there was a federal court decision that says that, at least in Manhattan, ICE agents cannot actually arrest people under these conditions in the courthouse, and they're doing it anyway. It's happened like 6 or 7 times.
Yeah, despite the order of a federal judge, Judge Castell.
So why is it still happening?
For a year, they were doing it lawlessly, and it turned out they knew they were doing it lawlessly. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, actually Jay Clayton, who's now up to be the head of national intelligence, he had to come forth to the judge and say, Your Honor, the memo we were relying on does not apply. It never applied. And so Judge Castell said, whoa, no more arrests in these courthouses. People need to know they can come to the courthouse for their case without being grabbed in the hallway. But still, yes, ICE has done 7 or 8 arrests in the hallways, despite a direct federal order not to do them.
I also want to ask you about something that DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin has said today. He said that any calls to turn down the temperature regarding ICE enforcement apply only to the media, not to ICE officers. Let's listen to that.
Since you mentioned turning down the temperature, what assurances can you give Americans that ICE officers will face consequences if they violate DHS's use of force policy?
When I say turn down the temperature, when I turn down the temperature with you guys, we're turning up the heat on the streets. We're out there working harder than we ever have because we've empowered our law enforcement to do their job. What I'm trying to do is remove us from the headlines every single day. But everybody will be held accountable.
What a thing to say after we've had 2 deaths, 2 shooting deaths.
They killed 2 people that were not even the people they were looking to peacefully arrest. Presumably even the people they were looking for only committed civil offenses. But these 2 people they weren't looking for at all. They shot them to death. And he blames the media. Yeah,
he blames the media. He says, keep us out of the headlines. Let us act with impunity.
And it's important to know that, well over half, more like 70, in some states 80% of people in ICE detention have no criminal charges whatsoever.